Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing some brass hammers made right here in the USA by a company called ABC Hammers. Now they've been in business for over 50 years and they make these ranging from 1 pound all the way up to 10-pound sledgehammers. And they have them with fiberglass handles as well as wooden handles. Now both types feature non-slip grips. The fiberglass ones have a rubber overmold grip, and then the wooden ones have a painted on textured surface very similar to like a truck bed liner. So it's going to hold up for a long time and it's going to keep your hand from slipping off of here. Now a few features about brass hammers and why they're important is that they are very corrosion resistant, they're non-sparking, and they are non-marring. And where that's really going to come into play, the non-sparking, if you work in the oil and gas industry or you work around any flammable gases or liquids, if you hit something with a steel hammer, you know a small spark can cause a huge fire or an explosion. A brass hammer is not going to cause that because they are non-sparking. And if you work on cars, for example, then non-marring properties are where it's really going to be beneficial to you, because if you hit a bolt or you hit, let's say, a suspension part, it's not going to dent it up or ruin threads where a standard steel hammer would. I'm going to show you some examples next of the non-marring properties of these, and I think you're going to be real impressed at the amount of force you can hit with one of these and not cause any damage to the item itself. To show you what I mean by non-marring, I'm going to take this lower control arm, and along this edge I'm going to hit it with a standard 4-pound steel sledgehammer. Along this edge I'm going to hit it with the 4-pound brass sledgehammer. Now the force that these two are going to put out are going to be pretty much identical. But the major difference you're going to see is that where I hit it with this steel sledgehammer, the work surface is going to become very beat up and very dented. The work surface where I hit it with the brass sledgehammer, though, is not going to have any damage at all, and all of the indentations you'll see will actually be on the face of the hammer itself. Now, where this will actually come into play is like a steering knuckle, where you remove the tie rod end nut or the ball joint nut, and then you want to remove the ball joint or tie rod end. You have to typically hit that steering knuckle with a hammer in order to shock it and break it free. But when you do that with a standard steel sledgehammer, you will always dent that material. But if you use the brass sledgehammer, you're not going to damage that auto part at all, and you'll be able to make sure that all of the damage is going to be sustained in the hammer head itself. So next I'm going to show you the two hitting this lower control arm, and you're going to see the differences. Okay, first I'm going to take the steel sledgehammer and I'm going to hit it here 5 or 6 times, and you'll be able to see the dents when I zoom in. Okay, you can already see there are some pretty significant dents going in. I'm going to zoom in on this now so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And those are the dents that were caused by that standard 4-pound steel sledgehammer. Now I'm going to take the brass sledgehammer and I'm going to hit this area. And you can see the surface face of this does not have any indentations in it yet. So I'm going to take this side. If you look at the front of this, ABC Hammers is right here on the handle. And then you'll see the number 4 stamped. On the other side we have Made in USA. So if we have the number 4 right here, this is the side that I'm hitting with. It is completely flat. I'm going to hit the same area 6 times. And you can see the hammerhead now has indentations in it. They're pretty significant. I'll zoom in on these next, as well as the area that I hit with the brass sledgehammer. The only damage it did was to knock some of the rust off. So I'll zoom in now on these two. So here's that edge that I hit. You can see it does not have indentations. All it did was knock the rust off of it. And the indentations were actually in the hammerhead itself. So you can see these are actually grooves now inside of the face of this hammerhead, and that is what absorbed that force, not the actual work surface itself. Okay, for the next test I'm going to be using some brand new grade 8 bolts. These are 9/16 by 4 inches long, and they are fine thread, so it's pretty much identical to the same kind of bolts you'll find on a vehicle suspension, holding on a shock absorber or maybe even a lower control arm. And what you'll find with these is that they're typically threaded through a rubber bushing, and then in the center of that rubber bushing is a little steel sleeve. And where the two meet is where this bolt actually goes through. because of salt, dirt, and debris on the road, that corrosion can sometimes basically fuse the two together. And you're stuck having to hammer it out, and then when you want to put it back, you have to hammer it back in. And when you do that with a typical hammer, you can really mess these threads up very easily, or the end of the bolt will actually mushroom out. So you're then going to have to take that bolt, clean it up on a bench grinder in order for the actual nut to fit back on, because with a steel hammer, it can really deform everything. But with the brass hammer, it's going to absorb all that damage, and the bolt itself is not going to be damaged. Okay, here is a brand new grade 8 bolt. And then here is a 2-pound ABC brass hammer. You can see that this side of the hammerhead has no indentations on it whatsoever. It's completely smooth. So this has not been previously done with this hammer. And then I'm going to use this flat face to first hit the end of the bolt. And then I'm going to actually put the bolt flat on the surface, and then I'm going to hit the thread sideways. So we'll be able to see if it's going to cause damage either way. So to start, I'm going to place the bolt against the vise, and I'm going to hit right on the end of it, 2 or 3 whacks. And you can see, let me zoom in now, you can see that the face of the hammerhead itself now has indentations, and the actual end of the bolt itself does not have any damage at all. Just to compare that to another bolt out of the same box, here's another bolt out of the same box. You can see there is no damage to the actual bolt that we hit, and that damage was sustained by the face of the hammerhead. So here's where we're going to hit with the hammer, right on the face, and you can see the face of the hammer has those 3 little marks on it. And here we go on the actual threads themselves. And we'll zoom in again. You'll be able to see that the threads are not messed up at all. Still look perfect. And then the face of that hammer now, in addition to those 3 whacks that we did on the end of it, now you can see little cross marks where the threads actually imprinted themselves. So I hit it with some force. It did not mess the threads up at all. All of the damage was sustained to the hammer face. Here's a more close-up view of the hammers themselves. This is the 4-pound sledge with that fiberglass handle. And you can see the end has like an epoxy coating on it, so nothing's going to get in there and make that split or anything. If you have water or maybe chemicals or something, it's going to be sealed. And then there is that rubber overmold strike protection, so if you over strike on something, it's going to hit that rubber overmold and it's not going to cause the fiberglass handle to splinter. And then down here on the base, it does have that rubber overmold grip that wraps all the way around the bottom. So the fiberglass handle itself is very comfortable to hold, and like I said, with that over strike protection, it's not going to splinter like an older fiberglass handle would do. And with the wooden handle, you can see that this is actually hickory, and it is grown, from what they tell me, in Tennessee. So even the wood does come from America also. And it does have a dipped coating, it looks like, on the end that is very similar to a truck bed liner. You can see it here. It has a texture to it. And in the end, instead of using a steel wedge, they actually use brass wedges. And here is a example of that brass wedge. They sent me one that was not already installed, so if you ever do split this handle, you can get a replacement handle, I would imagine locally, and then pick up one of these brass wedges from them. And you can see that the wedge itself is stepped, and it does have multiple grooves, so it's actually going to lock into that wood and it's not going to come back out. So other than the wood handle just deteriorating over time or splintering because you would overstrike into something, the wood handle also should last a real long time as long as it's used correctly. So now you've seen for yourself how these ABC brass hammers are going to save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and they're not going to damage what you're working on. Because they're a lot softer than steel hammers, they're not going to tear up the threads on bolts, and they're not going to dent up the auto parts you're working on, which is directly going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money, especially if you have to replace any of that stuff. If you like this video, please click like. If you like my channel, please click subscribe. And thanks for watching.